I could not afford to hire him. Burned through savings because he believed in my vision. Things got real. My name is Antoine Jackson. I am a Raleigh, North Carolina-based MSP.
What did success start to feel like once that adrenaline wore off?
For me, it was 1 million. That was the goal. It took us about 8 years. And the moment we got there, it really kind of changed the way I thought about things, right? Because conquered the beast. Now what do we do next? It's okay to fail. And failure isn't what we really define it to be. Sometimes we mistake failure for growth. He said, one of the reasons why we're leaving, Antwine, is, you guys are like a B+, A- MSP, and we're really looking for that A+. If we're being real and vulnerable, I may have cried on the inside about it. Our business is like really who defines us in a lot of ways, right? And we wear it like this badge of honor and also, this badge of shame when things don't go right. The last thing I wish a salesperson would tell me is they're going to help my business, right? You don't know shit about my business. You have no idea what I'm doing, right?
Antwine, please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why the hell that you do it.
So my name is Antoine Jackson. I am a Raleigh, North Carolina-based MSP. I've been in business since end of 2012. So I'm approaching like year 13-ish of my MSP journey. Why did I do it? So, the interesting story I always tell is, out of college, I went to UNC Chapel Hill, in case you didn't notice, for undergrad. When I came out of college, I worked for an MSP, really, successful MSP that was a great friend and mentor of mine, still great friend and mentor today, who, faced some challenges along his time in business where I had to go like 4 months without a paycheck. And, I'm one of the most loyal guys to the soil, but my girlfriend at the time, wife and mother of my children today, was like, look, if I'm going to support you on my shitty nursing salary, you need to be chasing your own dream and not someone else's.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the dawn of Initech. And, luckily for me, I've been able to surround myself around a great team and staff of people and people that have believed in me and really my vision, even though where some days my vision can be a little blurred. Sometimes alcohol induced, sometimes not. But nonetheless, it has been a remarkable journey. And I've had an opportunity to work with some great clients, great partners, and great people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the ways that we start the show as well as to kind of keep it raw and keep it real is we'll open the show by asking you a question that is left behind by the previous guest. And the previous guest, the question actually comes from Scott Scroggin from ConnectWise, part of kind of the evolution there with HTG and underneath Arlen. And his question is, if you were on this podcast 3 to 5 years from now, and whatever idea you had for success had come true, what would have had to happen as key milestones, say 2 or 3 different milestones between now and then to help you get there?
So I think for us, the big milestones, and we're talking about milestones that we would say are kind of those meters and indicators of success.
Yeah.
Well, I think for us, it would be hitting some revenue milestones would be very key and important, right? I also think, hitting some operational milestones, right? How tethered am I to the business today and 5 years from now? Because once again, time is something that is invaluable. And it's equally important as, the financial revenue aspect of things. But I think for me, those would be those key indicators. Did I do it right or did I fuck it up?
Yeah. And as you talk, even then through the lens of really kind of growth, right? There's one thing that I would say through your journey was like that realization, maybe that growth is not the same thing as maturity in the business. And yet depending, like success is also subjective. So some MSPs might have looked at you at any point along your 13-year journey and said, man, I just want to be like that, or I want to get there. So nested within that, you've essentially built a business that had worked, but when did you start feeling that maybe you hadn't?
Oh my gosh, this is a great question. So, when I first started, right, the goal for me was to get clients at any price. Good clients, bad clients, shitty clients, right? It didn't really matter. Revenue in the door so I could pay my bills, right? Start supporting myself, support my family. It's like every MSP has that fundamental journey. But then what you start to realize is every dollar a good dollar? Is every dollar a clean dollar? Is every dollar a profitable dollar? And, it's so funny because for the longest time, I thought I could disrupt on price. And I was
Hmm.
hell bent on, I'm going to beat you no matter what. I'll beat
Yeah.
you if I have to do it for free because it's just me and it's just my time.
Right.
Well, when you bring in employees,
Hmm.
you commit to tool stacks, you try to really become a world-class managed service provider, you learn that those two things cannot coexist,
Hmm.
at least if you're trying to do it at scale. So, for me personally, one of the things that I always tried to say was each year I want to be 1% better than I was the year before. Now, some of that comes from like my own personal journey as a person and
Sure.
like, my involvement in, competing in like Olympic Taekwondo, right? That was one of the things our coach always beat into us was like, try to be 1% better. Try to be the difference between first place, second place, third place is usually less than 1% because
Hmm.
everybody trained, everybody prepared, everybody did all these things the same, but it came out with a little bit of luck and then that one thing that gave you
Yeah.
that 1% edge. And that's kind of how I've always, approached it in the MSP space is figuring out a way that I can do something that maybe my peers are a little afraid to do, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe people are afraid to take certain calculated risks. But that does change when
Right.
you get older and you get a family and you have people
Yeah.
depending on you. So
Responsibility kind of shifts some of that stuff a little bit. Yeah.
changes the game.
Right. Was there a specific moment or a specific conversation that like hit you sideways?
Yeah, so like the moment for me where things got real was when my chief operating officer Chris White came to work with me, right?
Hmm.
And one of the mentalities I've always kind of had is like we are a team, right? No one works for me.
Sure.
Everybody works with me because
Hmm.
that's how we built this company.
Yeah.
And one of the most remarkable things that scared me was he, has a business background but worked in like the finance space, was working in property management and was looking for like a career shift and change.
Hmm.
And him and I have been friends for a long time just from going out and being on the bar scene, and he saw what I was doing, what I was building by myself, and he wanted to be a part of it, and I could not afford to hire him.
Yeah.
And this guy took a $500 a month salary
Hmm.
and burned through savings because he believed in my vision. So that was the moment where I had to really think about this because, I had to start looking at it like, well, this guy is betting the farm on me financially, right?
Yeah.
And I can't let him down. I can't, as a
Hmm.
leader, I have to step up to the challenge and really make sure I'm pushing us in the right direction.
Yeah. When did, maybe not when, what did success start to feel like once that adrenaline wore off from the early days?
Yeah, so like for a lot of us, right, we always set these financial milestone and goals, right? So for me, it was 1 million, right? That was the goal.
Hmm.
I wrote it on my mirror, and I
Yeah.
was obsessed with getting to 1 million. It took me a long time to get to 1 million than today's traditional MSPs, right? It
Hmm.
took us about 8 years, and the moment we got there, it was like, okay, we've conquered that beast. It's like getting your black belt. You get a black,
Yeah.
you're always like, I'm gonna get this black belt. Once you get the black belt, it's like, oh, well, there's more degrees to this, right? There's levels to this. So
Hmm.
once we hit 1 million, it really kind of changed the way I thought about things, right? Because, for the longest time, I was like, oh my God, this is the big beast that I've conquered. And then we've conquered the beast.
Yeah.
Now what do we do next? Well,
Hmm.
we go to 2 million, right? And then 3 million. And, it was so funny because getting from 1 to 2, I felt was very easy
Hmm.
because what we were doing was working.
Hmm.
Going from 2 to 3 was the next milestone of challenges because
Yeah.
what I had to learn was, which is hard, is that you can't be Kobe, right? You can't be Jordan. You can't
Hmm.
just put this team on your back or these bums on your back and carry it to the championship.
Yeah.
You have to believe in your team and you have to believe
Hmm.
in the people around you. And guess what? They're going to make mistakes.
Right.
Guess what? You are going to lose a client. But it's not about that. It's about what do you do after that.
Hmm.
And I think the moment you eliminate that fear, that is when you reach a turning point.
Yeah. But one of the things that really like shakes up back inside of me was the 18 years inside MSPs for me. Most of it was spent almost in like an indirect leadership role, right? Like I was on leadership teams, but not of those 18 years, maybe 8 of those years was I like a formal leadership role, but I don't know, 15 of them, it seemed like I was an indirect leader in the company. And there were so many of those kinds of just ignorant mistakes that I made early where it was like, it's pretty amazing. The whole world doesn't see the world the way I see it.
Yep.
Holy shit. Like that's a really random wake up moment. Like then you're responsible for people and it's like, okay, well, how do I effectively communicate either the vision or the expectation or the accountability or the delegation or the support, like all those things, right? Because people don't think the same way that you think. And so there was like all this growing and learning. But later on in my career, I think I really started to seek not so much what do I need to learn to like become who I need to become for success in this role, but it became more of what do I need to unlearn? What do I need
Yeah.
to unlearn about these expectations, right? So what did you have to unlearn about being the guy who had all the answers to get to where you are now?
You have to empty your cup, right?
Mm,
So for me, you know, I've never said I'm the most technical savvy person, right?
right.
I always try to say that I'm a very commonsensical, practical person, right? And I understand people,
Mm-hmm.
and people is my love language, right? Reading
Mm-hmm.
into people. And one of the things that I had to effectively do was understand kind of like two things, right? So one thing I never put a value on was time. I always kind of said, I'll do it. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Doesn't matter how much time it takes. And then, so the moment I separated that time was actually a finite thing,
Mm-hmm.
then the next step for me was honestly just kind of having this feeling of it's okay to fail.
Mm,
And failure isn't what we really define it to be.
right.
Sometimes we mistake failure for growth or growing pains. And, one of the things that really kind of ramped me up was, I was in this mode where I was kind of just almost like a zombie, just kind of going through the day-to-day motions.
Mm-hmm.
And we were getting clients, we were growing, and we lost this client that, had been with us for like 5 years, and they were like a PE firm client. The guy was a great mentor to me,
Sure.
really kind of started trying to change the way I thought, but I was so, when you're in it, you're so ignorant to things. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't pick up on what he was putting down until when they left.
Yeah.
And one of the things that literally lived in my head rent free for like a year was he said, one of the reasons why we're leaving, Antwine, is, you guys are like a B plus, A minus MSP, and we're really looking for that A plus.
Mm.
And let me tell you, I fucking lost sleep over it.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're being real and vulnerable, I may have cried on the inside about it. I talked to my friends about it. I talked to my wife about this ad nauseum. My wife's like, I mean, I feel like you might want to go see someone if you don't stop like obsessing over it. But what I did was I actually took a moment to because I'm very, like most of people in our industry, our business is like really who defines us in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we wear it like this badge of honor and also, this badge of shame when things don't go right.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of had to take a step back and say, look, prove it wrong, right? Elevate your game. Get on here and be, a thought leader in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Get in here and participate with some of the best in the industry and learn from them. And that's really what turned the tide for me, was kind of being humbled like that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we all have these huge egos, and I always say, oh, I don't have an ego, I'm a team
Mm-hmm.
player. Well, bullshit, right? We all have some sense of, narcissism in us.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really been kind of letting that go and just understanding that at the end of the day, whether this business succeeds or fails, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm a friend. So
Right. Yeah. How did you end up breaking that loop of saying I trust you, but still not being able to let go?
yeah, so it's funny because now we're like starting our EOS journey and like letting go of the vine, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was for scaling. So at some point, I had to kind of come to terms that I couldn't spend the equitable amount of time with my children. Luckily, I have a great partner in Jessica, who is really the core foundation of our family, because all my friends say that I parent the least out of all my group of friends, right? So I had to kind of respect that one thing, that she's putting in all this time and making my time count. I can't drive 3 hours to go install a printer. I can't go fly to, California to have a meeting with a high stakes client. I have to trust the members of the team, because at the end of the day, heaven forbid I pass away, the business dies with me. So if you really care about your legacy and building something that's bigger than yourself, well, at some point you have to evolve, where Initech is no longer Antwine. Initech is Initech.
Yeah, for sure. What scared you the most about stepping back from the front lines?
Two things: losing customers, and customers changing the perception of what I was capable of, or what my company was capable of, what our vision was.
Yeah.
And, the one thing I'm very self-conscious. I care so much what people think. But I think for me, it was the people's changing their opinion. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to understand that it's okay. It's just business. It's not personal.
Yeah.
And the moment I separated that, I was able, it made even like doing shitty deals go away, right? Like
Yeah.
one of the things innately I want to do is help at any price. And I had to take a moment to myself and say, hey, we can't do it at this rate, right?
Right.
But that was one of the hardest things. And trust me, don't get me wrong. There are times where I find myself slipping back into the old Antwine, but luckily I have a team of people that hold me accountable.
Sure.
My wife works in the business. She holds me accountable, no hold bars. Yeah. And, my colleague, Chris White and Kyle, those guys don't hesitate to call me out. Even some of the younger people like Rachel on our team, she will call me out in a meeting in an email. And I encourage that because that's one of the biggest problems that we have as owners is we build this like internal throne, right? This internal kingdom where we don't have accountability for oneself. Hence why we have to join peer groups and have these accountability groups. But accountability can start in your own backyard.
Yeah.
And I think the moment you adopt that and you understand that, it will help you excel as a leader beyond belief.
Yeah. It's like it's the one limiting belief in some ways where it seems as though, and it might be true in other industries, I don't know, but in our industry specifically and at the ownership level of MSPs, oftentimes they put on that cloak of invincibility, right? Like not so much do as I say, not as I do, but it's an element of because you're involved in so many different things or no one's there to hold your feet to the fire, right? You can just kind of slip by on the accountability train where like it's the self-accountability first.
It's hard. I mean, it requires so much discipline. And trust me, I'm not, one of my really good friends in the space, or one of my best friends in the space, Kevin Dimgani, he always says, dude, you're not a process person. He just calls it like he sees it. Right. And it's funny because, you have to almost accept what you're good at. And you have to embrace what you're not.
Right.
And I think the moment you do that too, you unlock so many doors, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thinking kind of back to wherever on the journey this question makes sense, I want to ask through the lens of, what did stress take from you before you realized that it was doing it?
My health. So high blood pressure, right? And, I'm 41 years old and this started in my 30s, right? And some of it was 100% lifestyle, eating like shit, not working out, but, a lot of it was the job.
Yeah.
And, getting nauseous when, something happened in the business and it literally impacting your physical health and well-being. I think for me, I can manage and deal with stress pretty well. Probably more than the average person in a lot of ways because I've been put in so many high pressure situations in my life. But I think as I've gotten older, I've also learned that some of the stress could be avoided with just preparation, right? Or some of the stress could be avoided with just letting go and having other people around you or putting those A players around you.
Yeah. So, what part of yourself did you feel you had to bury in order for the business to breathe?
I have to dot every I and cross every T, having my finger on every pulse. Also like evolving my duties, right? Am I better served by reading every ticket and making sure every ticket was done perfectly? Or am I better served at understanding the metrics behind the business that give me better command and foresight and vision? For the longest time, I flew the plane on feeling, right? And gut and instinct, right? Because that's how we all do it. But at some point, you have to understand that, that's gotten you here, but it will not get you to the next level. And at some point, you have to adopt command, right? So maybe it's metrics. Maybe it's understanding the financial viability. Last year, my number one action item was financial health and viability. And the way we accomplished that was I focused just on the finance piece. I didn't do any tickets. I didn't get involved in anything that, wasn't a major impactful business decision. And I just focused on that. And the fact that I was able to focus on that, we were actually able to move the needle. The problem we have is for us business owners, because we wear so many hats, we have so much diverted attention on things.
Hmm.
So we think we're pushing everything forward when in reality, we are just making a slither impact that will take many years to accomplish versus just hyper focusing on one thing and stomping that out and then moving on to the next. So that's something that I've had to change fundamentally, because I like to multitask and work on 10 things at once,
Right.
focus versus working on the one thing that matters the most, you know?
Yeah. Was it really obvious when you kind of went through that evolution? Was it obvious what needed to change at the time, or did it take some time to?
No, it wasn't. So like for me, I didn't really know, right? So when I got in this business, I worked for an entrepreneur who wasn't the best, business person at the time where he was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of took what I learned from that and changed the things that I saw that were blatantly different and started my MSP. But, I didn't do a lot of leadership development, even though I attended a ton of conferences. Yes, It was great to understand some of these different perspectives, but not true leadership development, right?
Mm-hmm.
How to manage, employees and people. But even things like what is true net profitability or EBITDA, right? And things that we finally kind of learn into. And, and it's funny because at so many events, you meet so many people that think they have the answers, right? And then you realize they're just figuring shit out like everybody else.
Yeah. Isn't that like the most, I don't know, it's the most humbling, the most motivating, the most revealing, the most rewarding, it's almost like the moment that most people end up eventually getting to, where you're just sort of like, shit. Everyone else really is just trying to figure it the hell out too. And they just happen to be in a different seat, figuring different shit out. But
yeah. And it's frustrating because it's such this posturing, right? That we all do, because no one wants to seem like they don't know, or no one wants to seem like they're inferior. And it drives me insane.
Right.
Because like you'll meet an MSP, right? And you'll see them on stage and you'll be like, oh my God, this guy has every freaking thing figured out. But then when you peel back the layers, you're like, oh my God, this guy's just like me. He just got an opportunity to present his perspective, right? And I think if more people took ownership of just the realities of like the way things are, versus trying to, and don't get me wrong, I believe perception is reality, and I believe sometimes you have to act bigger than you are. But I feel like in our community, we should do less of that and more honest, vulnerable conversations. I spoke at a conference earlier this year. I think it was the Channel Partners MSP Summit. And, after that opportunity, which I got a chance to share the stage with some of the best and brightest and largest MSPs in our community, I'm like, why the hell am I up here? You almost get imposter syndrome.
Right.
It was cool to have people come to me and say, oh my God, man, you really resonated what you said to me. Like, I felt that. And as I tell them, I'm like, look, dude, I don't have shit figured out. I'm just a guy like you are, working through each day. So,
right. Yeah, there is so much truth to what you just said, because the whole reason this show exists, this specific show, the MSP Insider, was in my transition from 18 years on the MSP side and then over to founding a vendor to serve MSPs. I don't know what I expected to like discover. I don't even know that I did expect to discover anything different or like fundamentally like holy grailish about the industry that I didn't already know from being in it. The thing that felt a bit as though the scales fell from my eyes is just how much insulation there is around the echo chamber that regurgitates the same shit, and most of it isn't what an MSP needs to hear.
Correct.
And so that was where this idea for the show was born anyway. It was like, I wish for any of the time that I was in those 18 years that somebody would have been out there willing to like say the thing that I absolutely needed to hear, even if I would have told you to like F off to your face. But I need you to grab my shoulders and like shake the shit out of me to make sure I heard it as an MSP, to just, I don't know, like demystify the garbage that existed otherwise. And it didn't matter if it was, the best practice bullshit or if it was the false prophets, which I know is one of your hot buttons, which we can dive into. But I don't know what or why the industry, the channel, as they call it as a whole, collectively props up that institution even. And, we don't have to name names necessarily, but we can go through the first topic, which is really that component of the false prophets. It's really a bit to what you're saying. It's how, why, people don't leverage their positions of, I don't even want to call it power, influence in the channel to have the conversation that both sides actually want to have, but again, no one's like willing to take that first step on the thin ice. I'd be interested to hear the MSP's perspective, so your perspective on, you know, how that evolved and you know what your experience has been through that lens too.
Yeah, so like it's tricky, right? Because first of all, let's acknowledge one true thing. Everybody that is a part of the MSP community ecosystem, whether they're a vendor, whether they're an MSP, even in the VARs, right? We all are successful people.
Right.
Baseline, right? If you've had the guts to start a business and you have at least one customer that is paying you $1 amount, Canadian or US, whatever,
right. Yep.
You are successful. And I think what happens is some have, more success than others. Some make the final big exit that every MSP dreams of. And it's almost like they forget where they once sat.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's they have, because the way that they've done it for so long has helped them achieve success. They believe that that's the only perspective and way.
Right.
And it's frustrating in a lot of ways, because don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people in this space that are more successful than I could ever imagine, that can give me a wealth of knowledge and advice that could really change the way that I do business and probably change the way of my life. But what I ask is be honest, be vulnerable, and be authentic, because you can't say that doing it this way works 100% of the time.
Right.
And that's where I get bent out of shape a little bit about it. Yeah. I also feel like, in our space, there are some people who have achieved a certain level of success, but once again, they amplify that as if they've made a grand exit, right? And they don't ever have to work again, but yet here they are doing this out of the kindness of their heart and not to pay their bills, which they are, right? And that's where things get a little murky and a little tough. And it's so funny because every time I've seen someone that's exited our space, they've made the golden exit. No one wants to talk about numbers, right? Because one of the questions I always ask, and maybe it's a little too aggressive, is I always say, so are you fuck you rich or fuck everybody rich, right? Because those are two different levels. And everybody gets caught off guard when I say that, but it's true, right? Like, to what success, so I can understand what mistakes did you make? What would you have done differently? But it's like we never want to peel back that onion. We just want to focus on putting someone in a system that can help them get to here, versus trying to take what people are good and not good at and propelling them in in the direction that makes sense for them. So
one of the things that I always try to harp on, you probably shouldn't use an absolute like always, but oftentimes was harping on, was one of the things you said I described always as, don't forget where you came from. And this whole journey of MSP, to your point of like, it wasn't always as great as it was when you exited. Like, help me out, right? Like, remember where I am and how do I get from here to the next step? I don't need to go all the way to the end, but that element is sort of this other essence that I think is odd in our space, which is, why do you think so many MSPs follow voices that have never actually built an MSP? And what's the cost of that blind trust ultimately?
I mean, it's funny because this makes me think of like, and this is bad, but I mean, it makes me think of like Amway and this, MLM kind of culture where, we as some of us as MSPs, I mean, it's the same thing even on the tool side, where we're very naive, right? Because we come from such a, we want to help you trusting background where we are kind of vulnerable and preyed upon, it's funny because you'll see the guy that, has the Rolex and comes in the nice car, and you're like, oh my God, he's the pinnacle of success, when he's never even participated in the business, right? He just tells that story because there's no way to fact check it, right? And, it's funny because like, in competition days, we'd always have this guy that said, he was an 8-time national team member, world champion. Like, I remember this one guy that told us, he was like, yeah, man, I was part of the 96 Olympic team. Well, if you Google it, Taekwondo wasn't even in the Olympics in 96, right? And it's like, oh my God, but people always want to embellish, right? To make them seem bigger, brighter. And, it's one of the things I try to avoid, even though sometimes it does happen. I try not to embellish anything, because if I'm honest and truthful to where I sit today, maybe there's something you can share with me, or maybe you are more successful, and maybe there's something I can glean from it. But I think a lot of it is more for positioning And I think a lot of it's pride, right? No one wants to look like a donkey, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right. What do you think the most dangerous piece of advice is out there from the channel gurus that's being spread through our wonderful echo chamber? And
well,
and that's the first part. Maybe like the second part then is, how do you spot that before it poisons your own strategy?
Well, I think the most dangerous thing is taking a managed service provider, and and maybe you don't know, right? And maybe that managed service provider is not forthcoming,
Sure.
but an MSP who is already in some type of financial distress, right? Like those 1 man, 2 man shops
Mm-hmm.
where they are just on the cusp of even breaking even or paying their bills,
Mm-hmm.
and then you want to sell them some type of service or platform or sales or marketing or solution that now not only like binds them financially for 3 years, but it creates quite the opposite. Now
Mm-hmm.
they have to perform on your platform has to work or they're going to fail, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of times we set up a lot of these other MSPs for immediate financial disaster and failure. And that's what's at cost, right? Hence why we have so many that'll end up walking away from a contract and having to deal with the financial consequences after or shutting down their business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's really unfortunate. So the way we spot this personally is, the first thing I always understand and I tell people is there is no such thing as the deal of a lifetime. The deal of a lifetime comes every quarter.
Yeah.
And if I miss the deal of the lifetime, I'm okay with that. I can sleep like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
That means the deal of the lifetime was not for Antwine at that
Right.
moment at this time.
Yeah.
So I try not to make a lot of knee-jerk decisions, even though some of my peer groups and pods would say, well, you own every tool in the stack. Well, I did at least put a little thought behind it. But nonetheless, I do think that for us, I don't buy today. I take some time. I think about it. Can I monetize it? Can I grow from it? What's the benefit? Even like us adopting EOS, I got a lot of pushback from Jessica, from Chris
Yeah.
on were we ready to start it now? And after discussion, we were like, okay, we are ready. So I think having other people who are not in it, in the thick of it per se, giving you that feedback and pushback is always good for a business owner not to get caught up in some of these different things out here.
Yeah. And I think one of the ways that you frame this too is the kind of the hyper sensationalism, right? Of this product's going to change the world. It's going to change my business, and let's book a demo right away.
Oh
But
my
then,
God, it is.
Then you end up in that doom loop of it all, right? You end up with so many tools you never adopted, adapted, or utilized. And you're just
Correct.
sort of like trading out contracts for the most part.
Yeah. And what's so frustrating is, you'll say, oh, well, I have this solution that does similar things and they overlap. And then they'll come back and say, well, we do this one thing differently.
Mm-hmm.
You should still buy us anyway, without even thinking about the financial impact on your business, right? Can I sell this at this dollar value? What if my all-in seat price, everything's baked in? And it's so frustrating because the last thing I wish a salesperson would tell me is they're going to help my business, right? You don't know shit about my business. You have no idea what I'm doing, right?
Right.
And you don't know how I'm structured. I could be doing bad deals all day versus taking the approach of this is a solution we have. This is how it's helping other partners. It may or may not work. It might be for you, it may not be, right? And I think if they took a more honest approach versus this pressure sell approach, you would have less Reddit trolls. You'd have less people upset about, different products and solutions. But it does frustrate me when someone wants to quickly book a demo, like I'm just sitting around doing podcast every day,
Right.
like I'm busy, right? Like I don't have a lot of time on my hands these days, but it's funny because I'll get a call every day about someone who wants to I just need 15 minutes. I'm like, bro, you're another fucking 15 minutes that I don't need to lose today. Sorry.
Right. You had 45 seconds and you didn't earn any more, right?
Yeah.
How often do you think MSPs mistake hope for strategy when they get stuck into that sort of demo dopamine hit versus like a real pivot point for the business?
More often than I would ever want to, admit to. And it's sad. Like I have a friend in the channel who, he's always relying on hope, right? He'll always say, well, if this deal with this big client opportunity goes through and I sell X amount of seats that I've already committed to versus get the deal done first and then get the seats, it's this hoping and wishing game. And unfortunately, hopes and dreams and wishes don't pay your bills, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think would happen if you invested that same energy that gets lost in choosing those tools, or, I don't know, getting wrapped up in the dopamine, optimizing the organization as you do chasing those shiny things, right? Like if you just could shift and reapply that energy, and maybe this is more past tense to, old Antwine,
Yeah.
since you've matured past it.
We would have been $1 million company a lot sooner. We would have went, from 2 to 3 a lot quicker. And, it's funny because, we've been caught in that trap again and again and again, where, that dopamine, that excitement, because you want to be cutting edge, right? Because that's part of staying sharp. But at the same breath, this is and this is one of the things kind of happening with AI solutions, right? We're in this new frontier of not wanting to be left behind. So we're making these like knee-jerk reactions on these different tools and solutions in the space that may not even be appropriate for our client base. So I think, the big thing for us has been take time to step away, to do the research, but also try to sell it before you buy it. See if there's even a need in your client base. But don't buy and then try to sell later. You're late. Try to sell it first. So one of the things we've done is we pre-sell it, right? We talk about the solution. We've done the research on the solution, and then we pre-sell it to our existing client base. And if we can hit a numerical threshold that covers our costs, okay, we'll adopt the solution. But if we cannot, then we wait on the solution.
Yeah, instead of taking like the shiny new solution and go look for the problem.
Correct.
You validate people that actually want the problem to be solved, and then you give them the solution.
100%.
Yeah, it sounds so simple when you say it that way, right? But
that dopamine's strong in the at those conferences. You gotta watch out.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the people along my journey had told me is, and it's rung true so many times, but hope is a powerful drug. And I think it has the same chemical makeup as dopamine.
Yes.
And so together they're just like a lethal combination.
Oh yeah.
Especially when, you.
And like most of us are visionaries, right? Because we're owners of these companies. So I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I just think we cannot mix hope with vision, right? Because vision's different, right? Vision, there's strategic, process behind vision, right? And or being a dreamer, like you want to, dreams are great until you have to execute them, right? And I feel like that's the big thing that we have to just kind of make sure we're always looking at is if we're going to adopt a tool, what is our go-to-market strategy before we buy it?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting about perhaps what we were just talking about and like how things get intermixed a bit when we look at what certain industries, what's working in one industry gets like thrown on top of ours. To your earlier point about, MSPs are sort of the industry to come take advantage of, is what the external world tends to use us for. And through that lens, other industries will pick and choose whatever success is working in that vertical and then try to bring it into this. And some does work. So it's not like it's all condemning it. And you should look for innovation elsewhere, or what would be innovative to our space that's actually like an old trick, in a different industry. But one of the ones that our own personal experience and then the industry experience suffers from is almost just tapping a bit too strong into the dopamine and hype and hope of the you just need more leads piece, right?
Correct.
Or like if I want to grow my business, then I need these other things. And the motion of things like appointment setting or cold calling or whatever label you want to put on it, maybe is shoehorned a different way than an MSP is ready for. What have you learned? What did you discover? What have you unlocked that kind of to the point of grabbing me by the shoulders, right? And saying, man, I wish I'd have known what I know now, type of a thing. What can we learn out of that process to grow?
Well, one thing, I mean, I'll kind of go to the first question just about some of these solutions that work in other spaces, but we try to put it in the MSP space. I mean, you see this a lot with enterprise solutions that are not built for MSPs or they're not MSP friendly, right? And lots of money is wasted. Lots of time is wasted. especially on the vendor side, they suffer the worst because they make these massive investments in going to trade shows. They're expensive, right? And then they find out there with this problem. It doesn't translate to the way that MSPs work and operate, and then they end up blowing these budgets, going out of business. Then you have staff churn in that regards. Other people jump into other solutions in the channel. So one of the things that I think, and I feel like now there's a lot more resources than there ever was for vendors with some of the market research that they probably need to do, especially with like focus groups and things like that. But I feel like one of the biggest issues you kind of see is we're always trying to solve a problem that may not even be there yet, right? Or you may have been ahead of your time on this solution. But kind of going back to the things that I would go back and do a little differently in regards to like, the appointment setting and cold calling was, when I first started the business, I needed revenue in the door, and I was a one-man shop. So appointment setting for me made sense in the moment, right? Because it was all about just getting to the bat and letting the rest occur. As I've grown and matured, I think I would have been more successful if I had a defined sale process on the front end versus just entering the races with that, thinking that was going to save and grow my business. One of the things that I feel like with cold calling is, unless you have the stomach to sustain that financial expense, and unless you are willing to do all the things outside of cold calling, you're just lighting money on fire, and I know that's probably a hot take, but it's true. Like if you don't have the investment to do the digital components, or even now some of these AI components, and if you don't even have the ability or the time to do owner-led sales because you're busy working tickets, appointment setting is just another tool that's financially hindering you, and you're better off taking that spend and developing the foundation that you'll need in order for it to be successful, right? And for me, we've kind of evolved away from the cold calling and more to the lukewarm calling, right? So instead of having this appointment setter try to set an appointment that doesn't know you from out, now don't get me wrong, we got a couple of, home runs, but they were few and far between, versus focusing on upselling to our existing client base. That's one way to increase revenue because they already trust you. And also like just focused on the opportunities that we've already built in our pipeline. And it's a long game, right? It's not a short game. And I think what happens is we have this misconception that in 90 days, our world is going to change and people are going to be just this random guy who I'm calling on a Friday to book a demo with because I have the MSP services that's going to change their business. Is going to go with me, right? Like it's just not realistic.
Right.
And I think that it's about doing all the things instead of just one thing.
Yeah. There's the thing I'd like to dig deeper on about doing all of the things, which I believe to be true as well, is I think it's Ben Horowitz, maybe in his The Hard Thing About the Hard Things book, he had the analogy of, or not analogy, the statement of, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's only lead bullets, right? And it's the only way out is lead bullets, and it's plural. And to your point, like leads is only one of the elements of the ingredients along the way. But if I don't know how to effectively communicate to transfer conviction, then I don't need someone to talk to. If I don't know how to deliver what it is that I said that we do, then I don't need anyone else to deliver to. If I don't know how to, you know what I mean? There's all of these other elements in sort of this Swiss cheese bucket that, kind of back to your point too, about like, you're not a process person, right? I don't think that's just pegging you that way. I would argue that the majority of us aren't cut that way. And so we need to prop up those areas of the business, patch those holes, and hire the right people and do all the right things to mature around that, to get to the point where, first of all, the thing that you do can be replicated, right? And then once it's replicable, now we can consider, can it be automated, or should it be delegated?
Right? And that's the thing, is that, and it's so funny because, it goes against like some of the people in the industry's belief that money is better vested in marketing, which I agree with, than hiring a technician. I also can agree with. But if I am a one-man show who is too busy to run tickets than to even make the appointments, well, maybe I need to invest in the technician first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the problem is we kind of take this blanket approach on one shoe fits all sizes, which is
Yeah.
not true, right?
Right.
And, kind of even like with the thing with the lead gen, the only reason why we even had success for it was we had the stomach to endure it for years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the misconceptions that we have is that we think that cold calling is going to change it today or
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That cold call, you may not see the return on investment for 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you have the vision to have that as just part of your marketing and sales strategy in cahoots with all the other lead bullets that you need to fire off,
Right.
you're not going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that you really anchor it back to like the stomach piece of it, because when I had joined the MSP to bring outbound into, they didn't even have a GL account for marketing. Right. And so like it's typical, 35 employees, $3.5 million, maybe 18 years old at the time. Right. And it had slow, steady up to the right growth. Like I would say that's probably an 80% makeup of most of the MSP industry, right? From a story. But then much like the industry kind of preaches at them, they sort of caught the bug of like, well, we want hockey stick growth too. It's like, well, yeah, you can have it. There's a certain amount of things that have to go into producing an environment that can create that, but you've got to commit to it. It's not just something that you can want. There's like a whole plan that needs to go into place. There are services that need to be deployed, but most importantly, there's got to be capital that is invested. And I won't come do it for this MSP unless a couple of things were true. One, the owners had to have not forgotten where they came from. So that was like my first litmus test piece. The other thing was they had to be able to demonstrate or prove the commitment level to the goals that they had, right? Because the expectation that was placed on me, which I wasn't afraid of, was 50% growth to MRR year over year for 3 years in a row. Well, the numbers weren't scary because I'd already produced a team that was producing like twice as many dollars, but it wouldn't have been the same percentages, right? So I knew it was possible, and I knew it was possible in market. So it was really recreating that engine just somewhere else. But to your point, ultimately about the stomach, right? Before I made that commitment of several $100,000 over a 3-year term, I also got internal commitment that said no one is going to talk to me about the cost or the expense associated with this growth for 12 months. 12 months, you can say whatever you want to me, but you're not saying anything to me for 12 months because I'm not going to defend the emotional reaction to this check going out the door every month, because it's going to take 6 to 9 before you even start to see any glimpse of what would then be hope.
And you've hit the nail on the head, right? It's like that's the thing that we always forget, is that what you're doing today is not immediate, gratification. It takes time. It was funny. I was just thinking about this too, like just from the service delivery aspect, we have this client that's they're a franchise, and, they do like biscuits and donuts, breakfast stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that we always kind of like have to talk to owners about as they open these new locations, they always want to put in like 20 kiosk stations and, 10 POS stations or 5 POS stations, not realizing the kitchen is still going to be the same size. So yes, you might be getting exponentially more orders, but it's still the same kitchen producing. Yeah. So all you're going to do is have more frustrated customers because they got their order in quicker and now they just have a higher wait time. And it's no different in the service delivery realm, where sometimes we try to do that hockey stick, high octane growth, but we don't have the internal infrastructure to onboard, to deliver, to service our existing clients. Right. And then we find ourselves in this world of just surviving through the churn, where we're churning clients, but we're gaining clients to keep the momentum where we are. And we're just a rat on a wheel at that point.
Amplifying chaos, increasing the pain, and not really gaining anything, right? It's like paddling the canoe upstream and staying the same the whole time. Yeah. What, as we start to kind of close the conversation, if your kids or the next Antwine was out there listening to really your journey and everything that you've kind of come and learned through the process so far, but they could only remember one thing from all of it, what do you hope they would take from you or take from this?
Yeah. Stay honest and stay humble,
Hmm.
and don't forget where you come from. I mean, if you can be honest with yourself and you can stay humble and committed,
Yeah.
everything else, that shit comes naturally, whether it's selling, whether it's growth, whether it's partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
because I think people appreciate more than ever an authentic version of yourself
Hmm.
than this, personified perception that you're this grandiose perception that, we try to paint to make ourselves look like we're the big dog. When in
Mm-hmm.
reality, we're all just little dogs with just different bark sizes and
Yeah.
sounds.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I've seen some things that are similar where it's like the further and further, the more and more our reality has become digital instead of analog, like human to human, actually in the real world. That seems to be even more true to your point, where like we as humans continue to crave that direct, genuine, vulnerable, authentic, real relationship or interaction, at a minimum, with the other human, just that much more. And sales to me, when I moved, I think it was like 10, 11 years on the ops side before I moved to sales. And there were two things that I took from it, two major things. One, it was the absolute greatest experience to evolve as a human because it was you versus you every single day. And so like it was the ultimate personal growth journey. And then two is that it always just came down to people still, like everything else. I knew on the ops side, it was everything comes down to communication or expectations. And if it was expectations, it was actually communication. And then like that was like the core ethos that came out of that time frame. And then that translated, yes, to sales, but um, it was more just amplified as, to your point, show up real, show up authentic. You're not going to be for everyone, and that's also okay. Like it
And that's
wasn't,
okay.
and it's
Yeah.
not the popularity contest where it's like my ego is attached to being told no, or like rejection is a thing that makes me, attack my identity. Like once you can shed those things, then everything else starts to fall in line, and it just sort of continues to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. The last question for you is actually somewhat open ended in that every guest gets to leave behind one question for the next one to open the show with. So if you could leave one question behind for the next guest on the show, what would that be?
So I think if there was one question I would ask, it would probably be something along the lines of, what are you doing to be 1% better than you were the day before? Whether it's in business, whether it's in life, um, what are you doing to be 1% better than where you were the day before?
Hmm, I love that. If people want to follow your journey, learn more, reach out, talk, maybe even gain something from the battle scars that you possess, where's the best place for them to find you, Antwine?
Look for me on LinkedIn. You can even look for me on social media, Antwine, Antwine Jackson. I'm probably one of a few, hopefully one of the good ones that are out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Antoine, thank you for coming on the show. And thank you again to the audience for tuning in to another episode.
Very cool. Thank you for having me, and look forward to being a part of this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man.